Hello everyone, and my name is Matt. And first off, I just want to thank you all for 500 subscribers. I know I've been away for a long time, but there's been a lot that's been going on since my last upload with this 7-up animation. So I decided that I would do a scene breakdown for y'all because I actually have a better computer right now. So just let me know how is the quality. I still in terms of my monitor is still a TV right now at the moment, so let me know how the quality looks and I will try to improve that as much as I can. But today, as we mentioned, we will be looking at this 7-up animation breakdown, and first off we're going to be looking at the lighting. So this segment is basically dealing with the lighting, and if I hit rendered view, you could see here we have the lights. There are 4 lights to begin with, and let me just move the animation up further a little bit along the animation timeline so that we can see what is going on. So let's just turn off all of these lights and start by looking at one light at a time. So right now we're going to look at the top light, and that's basically one top light here, and we could see that right now the power is at 1000 watts, and yeah, we just use that to get a bit of the rim of the actual can, and as you can see, it adds a little glow on the bottom of the scene as well. If you go to the right key light, we have this one. Originally I had the power at 500, and I'm just going to show you a little tip. The reason that I had it at 500 before is because I was doing this on a laptop and it was a bit hard for me to see the brightness on it. But what you could do actually is go to false color, and that you could see false color will show you the parts are overexposed in the lighting setup. So what you could then do is then go back to the light and then lower the power so that those red parts eventually turn to a more green or a yellowish color. And right there I had it at 164, I believe. You could take it much lower if you want, but 164 would be quite okay. And then for obviously for the top light, you could do the same by reducing the amount and then go back to Filmic, and you would have a more even color distribution on the lights for the scene. Let's go back here to this, and this is actually just a light to light up this part of the spotlight to spot on the logo of the actual can. And then here we have a backlight, and that sole purpose is just to give you that halo at the back that makes the can sticks out from the background. Sorry. So yeah, this part was the lighting segment, so we'll move on to animation. Okay, so we're looking at the animation now, and I just hit 3 on the keyboard just to see from the side view. And if we take the camera right back to number 1, we could see that the animation is just a linear movement on the y-axis for the camera, and that's as simple as it was. I just wanted a simple animation for the first shot. And if we have a look at the graph editor, we could see that if we make this a little bit larger, we can see there's actually one keyframe here and then one at the back, but I used the Bezier curve to make it a little bit faster at the beginning, and then it would slow down at the end. So as you could see, it zooms out really fast and then it slows down, and I just wanted that dynamic zoom effect on this first animation because I wanted it to seem as though you're zooming in from the can, and then it reveals the actual product and the lemon and lime, sorry. So yeah, that's it for the animation of this shot. So let's have a look at the shaders on the can and on the scene in general. So let's go to shader tab. Right now we are previewing the water droplets that we have here, as you can see. We have the transmission turn all the way up to 1, the index of refraction of 1.330, and that's because if it's water. And because this is EV, you need to make sure that you have on-screen space refractions on, and also have it on in the scenes as well, so that you could actually see through the liquid. Now, if we have a look at the can itself, it's pretty straightforward. We have the can texture, placing on generated on with this particular logo that we have here. I just found this logo online, and then I created a label on an Affinity Photo for it, and the dimensions of the can, and then I pipe that into the base color. But obviously we have a mapping node here on generated, and then you could see these values here. I set these values in place so that it would actually wrap around the can without UV unwrapping. I didn't feel like UV unwrapping at that point in time, so that's why I chose this. Right now, this one here inside of roughness is not really going to do much other than change the color a little bit, but I had a texture placed into this, but right now it's not on the new system that I have, so it's not going to show up as properly as I would like it to. It was just a fingerprint textures that you would have on the can itself. It makes it look a little bit more frosty. The lemons, these were actual lemons taken from Megascans, so I didn't have to do much shading on these. I just tweaked a couple of the materials on these ones, and yeah, I just had to tweak a couple of materials, the roughness on the lemons with the color ramp, just to make it a little bit more not as rough, because you know, if you look at lemons on their light, they actually have some glossy value to them, so I just wanted to add a little bit more glossiness to them rather than having them look as though they were wet. So you could pipe a color ramp in between nodes to control the quality of how shiny you want a certain material or not, by raising the black flag or decreasing the white flag, depending on what you want to do. And the last thing is actually the principal BSDF that I use for the backdrop, and that was just me using a base color of green, and the roughness right here is set 0.699, and that is about it. So most of the scenes you would see has this same scene setup, so it's not going to be that much I would do for the other scenes in terms of explaining, because they're using the same can and they're using the actual lemons that are in the scene. There are a couple of scenes that use ice, for example, and I would show you the shaders for those respectively. So we are having a look now at shot number 2, and we are having a look at the lighting. This is the first thing that we'll be looking at again. So if we use this scene, for example, we could see what is going on right here. It's a little bit bright, but we'll get through it. If you look through the camera view, we'll see that the scene is not going to be as bright as it is going to be. But if you turn off all of these lights, again, there are only 3, well, 4 really. We're going to look at this one. This one is right at the back, and if I turn on this one, we could see what that is doing. Just highlighting the shadows of the edge of the actual can. Then we have another area light on the right hand side, and this is doing similar to on the other side. It's actually filling in the right hand side of the can. And then we have the top light, which is not really serving a purpose here right now, but it will serve a purpose as the camera moves up. When we get to the animation, we will see that. We have this one, which is the front, and that is just lighting up the negative space that we had there, the dark spot that we had, and that's just adding a little bit more detail to that. Now remember, as I mentioned before, you could always come into the scene and you could check the false color, and obviously you can see right now everything is overexposed. which isn't the greatest. So what you could do, you could actually go to each individual light now, and then you could just start tweaking the values of these to make them more fit in with what you were looking for. Obviously, as I mentioned before, the laptop screen that I was using before wasn't the brightest, so I wasn't able to see as well as I would like. But go back to Filmic, you can see things are still looking quite decent if you adjust the lights as well. So that's a tip that you could always use. If you're not sure about the values and if anything is overexposed, then you could always go and use false color. So that's it for lighting. We are going to move on to animation. So we're looking at animation now, and if you have a look here, there's just a few things that being animated. It's a little bit more complex compared to the other one, but it's quite simple as well. Right now we have this curve, which is doing the animation of going up. It's actually not rotating really. As you can see, it's just going up into the z-axis. If we have a look at the properties, we could see it's just the z animation doing that in a linear transform setting. And if you look at the graph editor, you can see it's linear, it's just straight. Well, at least I thought it was. You could always hit T and make it linear. And as you can see, when you play, it goes up linear and it repeats itself because it is in the timeline. Also, we also have a empty that is doing the same thing, going up in the z-axis, but much slower than the curve that we have it here right now at. Right? Now you could choose any object to parent it to. At the time, I was just thinking about using it to rotate around the can on a follow path, but I changed my mind instead, and rather than changing the controls, I just left it. But on the camera itself, I believe there is a track tool, and that is set to track the actual tracker, which is the empty that you could see that I was animating before. So when the camera goes up into the air and it rotates around the empty, it actually follows the empty, and that's what gives you this dynamic shot. There are more than one way that you could do this, but this at the time was a technique that I chose to use for the animation of this scene. So we're going to move on to shot number 3 because the scene has not changed in terms of shading. So shot number 3, this is possibly my most favorite shot because of how it looks. Originally, well, I'm going to get to that when we get to the actual animation, but we're going to start off as always with the lights. So if I turn on the scene right now, you could see that we have more than one light, but it was parented to the empty. And the reason for that is because I wanted it to animate actually going through the tunnel, but I actually had a change of mind. And as you can see, there are more lights at the back of the tunnel. So right now we're just getting the actual scene lighting, the natural scene lighting. And if we turn on these lights, we could see those are one at the back, far down in the tunnel, right there, and then there's this one right in the front, just giving you lighting right here on the can and on some of the on one of the lemon. And this point light as well is further down in the can. So as you can see, it gives you that gradient like a tunnel. It has a light here and a light further down in the back. And I actually like the result that I got with this one. Like I said, I was planning to animate this can going down the tunnel, but I changed my mind and just set up the scene this way. If we go back to these lights now, we have a light on the bottom, and that's just giving me that little reflection there on the bottom of the can. We have one on the left, we have one on the right, and then we have one on the top as well, and that's just giving the can a little bit more shape in terms of the lighting, and it's also hitting these ice blocks as well and giving those a good set of reflection. But that's it for lighting. for this scene, we're going to move on to animation. So animation on this scene was quite dynamic, I would say. I didn't really use that much keyframes. As you could see, everything has its own rotation. And if we go on the can, for example, this was the only thing that I believe had an animation, and that's an animation on the zero rotation, and that's from 25 degrees all the way to negative 25 degrees. And that's because I didn't want to lose the whole focus of the logo. I actually wanted you to see from the beginning of the logo to the end of the logo. And that's something to keep in mind when you're doing certain products, because you want to make sure that the logo is visible of the product that you're doing. Now, the ice blocks and the lemons, they don't have animations. They do have animations on them, but I mean they don't have any keyframes, as you could see here. And the reason for that is because we actually have drivers in all of them. So different ones have different drivers on different rotations. So the X, the Y, and then that's estimate things differently. So to set up a driver, all you need to do for time frames, that is to move on the frames, you just have to type in here hashtag. So for example, I will use this one as a reference. Here we go. We're closer. So we could see it's only on the Z. So if we want to set a driver for this one, all we need to do is hashtag frame, and then we type in the percent, not the percent, the actual times, the star, and then we could put whatever we want here. So we could put 0.3 and then hit enter, and now we could see that it's not only rotating on the Z, but it's also rotating on the X as well, so it gives it a little bit more dynamic. But that's a bit too fast, so we could actually delete that driver, and if we I delete both of them we could actually delete this one, delete single driver, and if you look at this one, we could see that it's actually a bit slower, so it's 0.05, right? So which means that it's going to move a little bit slower on the Z rotation, and I just wanted slow dynamic rotations for them, and that's for every single one of them. Then there's some of them had different figures and different numbers, just to make things a little bit more unique. So that's it for your animation, and we're gonna move on to shading, and that's only for shading for the actual ice drops. So let's go to shading tab, and we're gonna see mainly be looking at the ice drops only, and it's quite a simple setup. As we could see here, we're gonna turn on that. We're gonna look at this ice drop because all of them are the same basically, and let's have a look at that. Right, so if you have a look here at the shader, we see that everything is piped strictly into the transmission, and that's to give it that kind of frosty different look, and also inside of the bump map. And I was just using noise texture for both of them, and it turned out quite nice. Maybe it could do a better job at it, but for the moment, that is what I came up with, to get some simple ice blocks. You get the frosted parts, you get the clear parts, and all of that is driven by a noise texture running through a color ramp into the transmission, and then also into the bump map to give it those kind of wavy textures on it. So that's it for shading. Let's move on to shot number 4. So shot number 4, lighting. Let's have a go. Let's turn on the animation here, the render preview, and turn off all of these lights. Actually turn off the collection, but we just want these lights right here. So we are off. We have the top light again, self-explanatory at the top, giving a little rim to the actual cans. Then we have left first and then right. Then we have these lights here, which is right here on the left front of these cans, giving a little shading onto the side of the cans, and the same thing at the front, but this one is for more this can because this is was having a little bit of shadow there, and I wanted to brighten that up again. And we have the bottom, as you can see, is adding that little bit of impression there at the bottom of the can. And these two were not used, and this one here at the top was just to give these two cans at the back a little bit of rim light from the right and from the left on this one. And that's that for lighting. We're going to move on to the animation now. So animation, let's go back to the timeline, and we're going to see that the only thing that was moving again is the camera. So there's a lot of things that you could do with just one animation to make things a little bit dynamic, and if you go on the camera, we could see that. So again, we have two things going on here. We have an animation on the Y animation on the Y axis going backwards, and while that is going backwards, we also have the depth of field, and it is changing from the 27 millimeters to 85 millimeters. I think you call this the Ken Burns effects, but if not, I would put it in and post what it is actually called. But you know, you use those sort of things to give you a little bit of dynamics, and if you look at it, you could actually see the actual warping of the cans as they change. So it's just one animation, but it adds so much dynamics to the actual product that it makes it look as though it's not just a simple transition. Again, this is just another simple animation, but I utilize the Y location while also zooming in the lens as well, so it more or less complements one another and adds that sort of special effects to it. So shot 5, this is the last scene in the animation. It is actually the first scene, so the lighting is not really that much different, and we have the bounce light at the back, and that's it for the lighting. And we're going to move on to the animation, and then I'm going to show you how I composited the words onto the actual animation. I didn't do it in Blender, I used Fusion 9 for that. So animation again was straightforward, nothing fancy, just camera moving from X to X, so point A to point B, and that's it for the animation. But I am going to cover the fusion animation in this one. If I go back to Blender quickly just to stop that animation, we're going to open up the composition that we had, 7-up composition, and then we're going to drag this to the viewer. Not sure if you ever heard about Fusion before, but Fusion is a node compositing program. It's kind of similar to After Effects, but it doesn't use a linear workflow. It uses nodes, and I'm really truly looking to get into using nodes a little bit more because I kind of like the workflow, but I'm still learning the process as well. So right here we have the shot by itself, and you could just click on number 1 to show the viewer, or you could just drag it to the top, and sometimes you might have 2 viewers, so you could see the final output, which then I will hit the fit, and then we have this output. So here's the final output, and then we're going to see how we built it up. So then we have the text, which is, I just use drink it straight up, and that is something that I found straight on 7-Up's web page, and I animated it. So as you could see right here is these green check marks right here on the timeline. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it, but those green check marks are the timeline, or the parts in the timeline for the animation. So you usually just right click and you go to animate, but you're not going to see the setting right there right now. So if I go here, you see animate if you right click, and all I did was to simply animate the right on, so that would give you that kind of right on effect. And I piped that into a merge so it was over that, but then I wanted also to have this dot. So this dot was the dot that you would see pop up here, but right now I started off with a ellipse, which is piped into a background mask. So if I solo that as well, you could see it's just a circle with a background. And if I go to the background by itself, if I plug this out, you could actually see it's just a rectangle right there. But I use a circle mask to mask out that background to give me a circle. And then I use a transform, and the transform is what actually has the animation on it. So you could see from frame 70 to frame 80 is where you have that animation going on. And then I merge that again over the actual animation, and then I saved it out into the saver node. The saver node, it has, you could change it to QuickTime, and then you could change the export type, and then you could change the format to what you want it to be, and then you save it out. But if you look again at the timeline, you could actually see right here where the animation is going on. And to have more control over that, you could then go to and you could see right here, I just changed the type animation by editing this plane again. Simple, kind of simple, similar to what you would find in Blender's graph editor. And yeah, that's it. And that brings us to the end of this animation breakdown. I hope you liked it, and leave in the comments below anything that you would want me to improve, anything that you want me to touch more on in future tutorials. And if you have any ideas also, you can leave them in the comment section below. And always, yeah, just give me some feedback and let me know what I could do to improve also the quality of the videos that I'm putting out on YouTube, because I'm always looking for ways to improve. And I upgraded my mic to a lavalier, but I'm looking at ways to get a better mic as well to streamline the process as well. So again, thank you again for 500 subscribers. I really do appreciate it, and looking forward to put out more content as the weeks go by. Stay safe, and thanks for watching.